Hardly any motorcycle has shaped the history of the naked bike segment like the Ducati Monster. Small, light and compact was already the motto back in 1992 when it first appeared on the market. It caused quite a stir back then, and now I'm standing here in front of the 5th generation. This is the Monster with refined attributes developed over the years. And what it can do and what it has to offer, you're about to see.
In that hum, stealing fire, shadows glide, we climb higher, leather tight, eyes ahead, feel the road, nothing said. In our streets, heartbeat slow, twist the throttle, watch it go, chrome and black, wind and line, this is ours tonight, we ride.
The original Monster from 1992, the M900, is something many of you, just like me, probably still remember very well. That was also around the time I started riding motorcycles. When it came out, it was an incredibly compact and dominant naked bike and really turned heads. Back then it was powered by an air-cooled, or rather air and oil-cooled V-twin engine with 2 valves and a rather modest 76 horsepower. Still, it was a huge milestone for Ducati. Today, with the 5th generation, Ducati has taken several big steps forward. Over the years, the Monster came in different displacement versions, starting with the 900, then a 600, a 750, and at one point even going up to 1200 cubic centimeters. Now they've come back down to around 900 cubic centimeters. Here we have 890 cubic centimeters. The direct predecessor still had just under 940 cubic centimeters. Now Ducati is using the latest V-twin engine that we already know from the Panigale. This engine is one of the lightest, if not the lightest, V-twin Ducati has ever built. And that obviously helps in a compact bike like the Monster. Power output is 111 horsepower at 9,000 revolutions per minute. In the Panigale it produces a bit more, but here the peak power has been slightly reduced in favor of better rideability at lower revs. Instead, you get more torque earlier in the rev range, exactly what you want from a naked bike. Maximum torque is 91 Newton meters at 7,250 revolutions per minute. One of the key features is the variable valve timing. It allows different valve timing across the entire rev range and creates a broader spread of power and torque. At 3,000 revolutions per minute, you already have 70% of the maximum torque available. At 4,000 revolutions per minute, you're at 80%. That translates into strong pull from low engine speeds. Thanks to this engine, Ducati also saves weight. The slim design allows for a very compact overall motorcycle. Of course, the engine meets the Euro 5+ emission standard. Oil service intervals are at 15,000 kilometers, and valve inspections are only required at 45,000 kilometers. A clear sign of Ducati's confidence in this engine. There is also an A2 compliant version with reduced power for new riders. When it comes to the chassis, Ducati uses a monocoque concept similar to the Panigale. The engine acts as a stressed member and is directly connected to the steering head. That eliminates the need for a traditional frame, saving weight and keeping the design slim. The monocoque itself weighs only around 4 kilograms. The rear subframe is made of steel in a conventional design. Altogether, the bike weighs just 175 kilograms, ready to ride without fuel. That's 4 kilograms less than the previous model. Visually, the redesigned fuel tank stands out. It strongly resembles the original 1992 Monster, narrow, with pronounced knee cutouts for good grip and that characteristic curve when viewed from the side. They also borrowed heavily from the Panigale when it comes to electronics. We've got a very similar structure here, both in terms of layout and operating logic, just like on the Panigale. There's a 6-axis IMU sensor unit on board that precisely detects the riding condition in order to provide all the necessary data for the regulation quality of the electronic rider aids. And yes, we've got plenty of rider aids on board, starting with traction control, wheelie control, engine brake control, and different riding modes that you can switch between while riding. It's relatively easy to operate from the left switch cluster. There's a central multifunction switch that you can comfortably control with your left hand while riding, allowing you to toggle between the different modes, which you can pre-configure individually. All of this is displayed on a 5-inch color TFT display that's really easy to read, even under strong sunlight. There's also an automatic day and night mode switching function that worked really well today while riding through tunnels where the brightness changed dramatically. The display quickly adjusted to the appropriate brightness level. The layout is very clear, and the menu structure is fairly intuitive and easy to navigate. Besides the 4 riding modes, we also have different power modes. These allow you to configure the throttle mapping, or in technical terms, the throttle response curve, meaning how the throttle input translates to engine output. In the first 2 modes, you always have full power available, although the second mode softens the throttle response slightly. But if you twist it all the way, you still get full power. Then there are 2 additional modes that are more restricted and also reduce peak output. If you're riding in poor conditions, on slippery roads for example, that power reduction can really help. To make all this possible, the bike naturally uses ride-by-wire. That's the technical foundation required to implement these different riding modes. There are also some nice additional features available. Some of them are optional, but definitely nice to have, especially in conditions like we had today. It was pretty cold up in the mountains, and that's when you're really happy to have heated grips. You can adjust them in different heating levels, and they generate a surprisingly strong heat output. I was very grateful for them today. Even in low outside temperatures, they kept my hands properly warm. There's also cruise control. And on the multimedia side, you've got several features as well. Turn-by-turn navigation is available as an optional extra. It's displayed directly on the TFT screen. For that, you need Bluetooth connectivity and a GPS-enabled device, for example, your smartphone, which you connect to the bike to transmit the navigation data. The whole system is operated via a central control pad on the left side that's shaped almost like a little flower. You've got left, right, up, down, and a confirmation button in the center. That makes it very convenient to navigate through the menus and select whatever setting you need. Next up, and probably something many of you are interested in, is the suspension. This time Ducati went with components from Showa. At the front, we've got a version of the big piston fork with a diameter of 43 millimeters, but without adjustment options. Ducati says the typical Monster customer doesn't want to spend time fine-tuning suspension settings, so they deliberately left out adjustability. That also helps keep the overall price more competitive, which we'll get to in a moment. At the rear, mounted horizontally on the left side, when viewed in riding direction, there's also a Showa shock. And Again, adjustment options are limited. The only thing you can adjust is spring preload. That's actually useful since riders vary in weight and may carry luggage. At least you can compensate for that. The shock uses a progressive spring. That means the initial response over bumps is soft and comfortable, but as the load increases, the progressive rate resists bottoming out and prevents the rear from sagging too much. Tire dimensions are very common, 120 at the front and 180 at the rear. That's a good balance between agility, grip and feedback. Mounted as standard is the new Diablo Rosso 4 from Pirelli. That's no surprise. Ducati and Pirelli have worked closely together for many years, developing and testing in collaboration, which you can clearly see here as well. At the front, there are two 320mm Brembo brake discs. The master cylinder is radially mounted and adjustable to suit different hand sizes. You can easily adjust lever reach. At the rear, there's a 245mm disc, also from Brembo. The calipers are Brembo as well. M4 units up front, known from previous models. Combined with cornering ABS, braking performance should be excellent. We'll talk about how that actually feels in a moment. Now let's move on to ergonomics, a very important point. The seat is 5mm lower than on the previous model. Combined with the very slim silhouette, that results in excellent ground reach, even for shorter riders. Let me hop on quickly to demonstrate. You can see that even though I've got relatively long legs, the ground contact is very secure. Even smaller riders should have no problem. The riding position is upright and relaxed, making long rides comfortable. The handlebar isn't excessively wide either, which allows for good leverage without requiring much effort. The only potential compromise is for very tall riders who might experience a slightly tighter knee angle due to the low seat. But for me, even on longer rides, that wasn't an issue. As always, it's a compromise between ground reach and seating comfort. Standard seat height is 815mm. There's an optional lower seat that reduces height by 20mm. Additionally, there's a suspension lowering kit that lowers the bike another 20mm. So in total, you can reduce seat height by 40mm, which makes the bike accessible even for very small riders. All right, then let's get to the most important point, namely the riding behavior and the riding impressions. We were out here today in Spain under very changeable conditions on some really beautiful mountain pass roads, and we had quite good opportunities to test the bike in all kinds of different situations. And I have to say, what impressed me the most was the engine. It fits the motorcycle incredibly well. They really managed to give the rider a very broad performance spectrum here. Unlike what you might be used to from many V-twins, you can actually let the revs drop down to 2000 RPM with this engine, then still go full throttle, and you don't get that typical jerking and banging through the chain. It basically pulls away quite smoothly from 2000. At 3000, it already pushes properly. And from 4000 onward, like we said earlier, you already have 80% of maximum torque available, and that really drives you forward. Even if you wouldn't expect it, the 111 horsepower feels noticeably stronger in this very light motorcycle, and it's genuinely a lot of fun. And even though we're not dealing here with those 200 horsepower super nakeds that you see offered everywhere nowadays, I have to say this bike is still a lot of fun because it's also very easy to move around, and the engine fits the overall concept really well. In my opinion. And with this extremely slim design, I have to say, I like that a lot as well. And the shorter riders among you are going to benefit from that too, because with this slim build, your legs don't have to go so far around the motorcycle, especially when it comes to maintaining balance while standing. That's very pleasant. And of course, that's also largely thanks to how narrow the engine itself is built. The smoothness and refinement of the engine, I have to say, is also pretty hard to beat. It works really well. We have hardly any vibrations in there, even at higher RPM. And the engine also pulls nicely all the way to the rev limiter. It might not be tuned quite as sharply as what you'd know from a Panigale, but that's of course intentional because of the concept. And you really benefit here from a stronger torque curve that already hits at very low revs. And that's exactly how I would imagine it for a motorcycle in this category, because here I don't really get much out of huge peak horsepower. Here I want to be able to exit tight corners with a lot of punch, ride with fewer shifts, be more lazy with shifting, and you can absolutely do that with this engine. Something we maybe didn't fully mention earlier, we of course also have a quick shifter with blipper function integrated here, meaning it's not only for upshifts, but it also handles downshifts fully automatically. However, it only works in certain operating conditions. So if I want to downshift, I of course have to close the throttle. And when accelerating, when upshifting, I always need positive drive force, meaning no engine braking torque, otherwise it won't work. You already have systems on other motorcycles that work regardless of the riding situation. You can shift up and down at any time. That hasn't been implemented here yet. And with the quick shifter, we are also looking at version 2.0, where the sensor is no longer integrated in the shift rod, but rather inside the engine, and it detects via the shift drum position whether the shift action should be triggered or not. For me, it works quite solidly. But of course, with this kind of position detection, you don't really have the possibility to apply a certain preload to the shifting system in order to keep the trigger force always exactly the same. And you can feel that from time to time, the shift action feels a bit different. It's not really disturbing, but maybe it's not quite as uniform as what you might be used to from other shifting systems. Another plus point of the engine is the clutch function. They invested quite a bit of work here to improve it, and you have to say it paid off, because the clutch pull is noticeably lighter. Even with small hands and delicate hands, you can operate the clutch easily with just 2 fingers. And that, of course, makes it extremely comfortable in stop-and-go traffic, because you can always generate the right drive in a relaxed way. The electronic rider aids that we have here can be adjusted and stored in different intervention levels within the freely configurable user modes. And I have to say it works very comfortably and very smoothly. You can clearly feel the interventions, and they're genuinely strong when it becomes too much. Today we had a few wet sections where we tried that out to see how it functions and regulates. And yes, the control quality is really good. And when you reduce the intervention level again, I have to say it also works really well in terms of releasing a lot more power again. And that, of course, helps all those who want things a bit sportier, because you can get closer to the limit. Another highlight in this class, in my opinion, is this ABS system that can be switched off in stages. We have the option to select 3 levels: full regulation front and rear, then an intermediate mode where rear wheel lift detection, for example, is disabled to give you more braking performance, and then a setting where only the front wheel is regulated by ABS. And that helps if you really want to have a bit of fun if you want to set the bike up a little more before the corner and allow more movement. For those riders who have the skill level for that, it definitely makes sense. And of course, it also helps to reduce braking values and braking distances noticeably. The suspension, as we said earlier, is from Showa and not really adjustable. I have to say, for a normal road use, they hit the setup pretty well. At the beginning of the stroke, it's really comfortable, soft, but it still doesn't generate too much movement. You can see it nicely if I maybe sit on it briefly. Even with my 70 kilos, you can see it compresses well. So you can tell that, especially at the start, the spring rate tuning isn't too harsh or too stiff. It's more on the comfortable and softer side. Even up front, we've got a very responsive fork, and that generates a lot of riding comfort, especially when we ride over very strong bumps in the road. I have to say, you really get a very good level of comfort, which you obviously appreciate, especially if you're spending a longer time out on the road. And when you ride sportily, you don't necessarily get that excessive movement that you sometimes know from soft suspensions. And because of that, I have to say, you don't really miss those missing adjustment options all that much. Anyone who really wants to individualize it further would have to make changes internally, intervene in the suspension. But even there are additional options available. So far, we've heard a lot of positives. Maybe one small criticism I noticed is the throttle response. We have ride-by-wire implemented here, and that gives you the possibility to map the throttle valve based on a certain mapping from the twist grip. While riding, the engine response is pretty good, especially in sport mode, also very direct. However, if I want to pull away quickly from a standstill in first gear, I need an unusually large throttle opening in order to have enough power available. So it seems they used a slightly different throttle map there, which is a bit unusual. Once you know the bike from cruising around, then especially when pulling away quickly, you have to be a little bit, careful so that you don't stall the engine. Another small criticism may be regarding the controls at the levers. The turn signal switch is extremely softly mounted and very softly sprung. And when you're riding with somewhat bulkier gloves, it's very hard to tell whether you've already activated it or whether you've returned it to neutral. That's something they could maybe rethink in the future and optimize slightly, but those are really just minor details on the side. The sound, I have to say, I like it a lot. It's of course Euro 5 Plus compliant, so accordingly it's quite quiet. But that also means we can ride into sensitive areas like we know from certain sections in Tyrol. And you can ride there without worry, without being afraid that you'll run into problems. For those who want to take the sound story a bit further and want a bit more sound, there is an accessory exhaust available, a different slip-on muffler, or even a full system directly from Ducati. Finally, as an overall conclusion, I have to say I like the bike tremendously. It's really very easy to handle. It gives an experienced rider like me a lot of fun too, even though we don't have 200 horsepower here. Thanks to the 174 or 175 kilo base weight, it's incredibly easy for a beginner to operate as well with this engine and this clutch. So even for a new rider, they're definitely going to enjoy this motorcycle. It's of course also available in an A2 version. That means for those who want to ease into it step by step, there is an A2 option here as well. And while we're talking versions, quickly mentioned again, it comes in red and in white, and then additionally as the plus version. The plus version means that regardless of color, you additionally get a rear seat cover and a small windscreen in front of the display. But you can also retrofit that later if you buy the standard version. What's also important, and what you'll probably be interested in, are of course the prices. I wrote those down here as well. In Germany, the red version will be at 12,890 euros. The white one is another 200 euros more, and the plus version, where those two extra items, rear cover and front windscreen, are included, costs another 400 euros on top. In Austria, we of course have different prices. There, the red one costs 15,090 euros. The white one costs 15,290 euros. And the plus version adds another 300 euros. Yeah, in the end, I have to say, I'm happy that we've got a Monster again in the style of earlier days standing in front of us. It really reminds me a lot of the original Monster, especially the headlight up front, maybe a bit more oval than before compared to the classic round headlight, but still technically massively upgraded. It's a huge amount of fun to cruise through the roads on this light motorcycle, even though it only has 111 horsepower. It makes everything incredibly easy, simple, also suitable for beginners. So I think that for the price, the entry point should be achievable for some people. Yeah, I hope I was able to give you a good review and that you could take away a lot of information from it. I'm signing off here from, yeah, in the background you can see slightly rainy Spain this time, and I'll just say bye until next time and see you then.